Good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you all with us. Thank you for joining us to this webinar. This paper of us is part of a research project on trust and regulation. And this particular one is on trust and regulatory capitalism. And what we are trying to do is to understand trust in major companies, major corporations. We also try to develop a trust ecology approach. So we are trying to do two things together, and we are two. So it's not only me or Shahaf. We are both on this topic. Shahaf Zamir, my co-author, is senior lecturer at the Reichman University, at the Institute of
Liberty and Responsibility. Liberty and Responsibility in Reichman University.
Excellent. So liberty and responsibility, not only liberty, but also responsibility. Is also a postdoctoral research and lecturer at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So the presentation will be mostly by Shahaf, but I will do the initial introduction. So Shahaf, can you please share the slides? Okay, so here we are, trust and regulatory capitalism. And what is regulatory capitalism and what is trust ecology approach we should explain. Actually, we should explain also what is trust, right? It's not only that the trust is understood in one way, but in this paper, trust is the result of is mostly measured and defined by the World Value Survey, which is a large survey run now for the seventh and soon eighth wave, which cover dozens of countries. The number is increasing gradually over time. And now it's over 120. And this questionnaire asks citizens, hundreds of thousands of them, all over the world. The questionnaire asks them, do you trust this and that and the others and this body or another body? And we have many answers at the moment, over at least 27 indicators and actors and institutions which are subject to this kind of scrutiny. Do you trust them? And we use this data. So what are our aim? It's to understand how we trust corporations or major companies in the language of the survey. Yeah. Thank you, Shahaf. We want us to understand why, to what extent we trust or distrust corporations, right? Corporations are engines of economic growth. They are political actors. They are important, right? Important actors in public policy and political economy. So in this sense, what we are doing is following trust from the 80s in those institutions over time. And we try to explain it. And but this is not only what we do. The other things that we do is to develop explanatory approach, which we call trust ecology. Why to explain with trust? We're explaining in a way trust with trust, not only, but trust with trust. So we say, actually, trust in someone or trust in one institution that is not really independent from trust in other institutions and actors. There is this ecology of trust that where we learn to trust on the one hand, we emulate trust and we take trust from one institution to another or one actor to another. And this should be explaining or be investigated as a form of influence on trust in corporations. Yeah. Most of the literatures that we see or read takes one indicator of trust, and there are so many indicators. For example, social trust, institutional trust, political trust, and they correlate it in a regression analysis with the result. So what we are doing really is looking at the trust as a whole. We are not selectively taking the trust indicator which is best for us. So it's a whole universe approach to trust. And this is something that we do and is unique to this study or to this project more generally. And I would only say before moving to the next slide, or maybe you can move to next slide now, Shahaf, that we organize the idea of the trust in the concept of regulatory capitalism, which means that capitalism today, nowadays, in the maybe ever, but increasingly over time, is being shaped by regulation. For better and worse, it depends on regulation, right? Some of them are with the public interest in mind, and the others are not. Sometimes the results are clear or the effect of regulation are clear. Sometimes they are not. We have to decide. But we can speak about capitalism today without regulation, meaning the rules that govern and constitute market economy. Another context where we study this phenomena is the so-called decline in trust in institution. Sometimes also decline in trust at the social level, meaning between different citizens at the community level. And what we are doing is looking in one way, adding to this kind of literature. Do we have a problem of trust in nowadays capitalism or democracies? And if so, why? We ask what drives it to the same extent that we find it. And this is what the kind of the methodological part that Shahaf will speak about. And what is unique is, of course, that we come with the trust ecology. Another option to study trust in corporations to say, let's look at their performances. The more corporations are performing well, meaning providing production, services, and so on, the more the public will trust them. But we control to this option, but we are making a real effort to develop the trust ecology approach. I think we can move forward and present the research question, and then Shahaf will present. So we have three major research questions. First, how does trust in major companies change over time? And with sort of comparison to other major type of trust, social and political. The second research question is which other types of trust are associated with trust in major companies over time. So we look at that over time. And I remind you, we have 27 indicators as a starting point. And the third research question is, what are the relations between regulation and trust in major companies? Here, this third research question, you can move on, this Shahaf. This third research question is about regulation and trust, about the extent which crowding out or crowding it in is the right perspective to look at the relation between trust and regulation. So we have one argument, one seminal paper from 2010 by Aghion et al. Aghion, by the way, got a Nobel Prize for his work in economics this year, the last round. And what he says there, and his capable colleagues, they are saying that trust regulation are substitutive, meaning the relations are that the more trust you have trust in society, the less the society regulate. So regulation in a way is indication that something wrong is within those regulating countries. This is seminal paper, usually read in economics, not in politics, and cited by economics and not politics. It has several thousand citation on Scholar Google. And we, to some extent, going to revisit it in the project itself, but also in this specific paper. And we're revisiting this paper by examining to what extent trust and regulation are really complementary, crowding in each other. So to what extent a society that has better regulation also have more trust. Two ideas that will be played out as part of this paper, and we're trying to bring the trust ecology as a contribution, but also to contribute on this important idea of what are the relation between regulation and trust more generally. And this is my part, and now, Shahaf, the floor is yours.
Okay, so from these three theoretical frameworks, we derived 6 hypotheses. The first hypothesis regarding the trust ecology, it says that different trust indicators are interdependent and jointly explain trust in major companies better than any single indicator. If trust is an ecological system, then this hypothesis will be correct. The second, which is also kind of derived of the first framework, is that trust in major companies is an empirically distinct evaluative domain than other social or institutional trust. And we will show in a second how we are going to check it, to test it. The third hypothesis is that institutional trust, mainly political, legal, and international trust, is a stronger predictor of trust in major companies than social trust. We relies on Newton's distinction between a vertical trust in institutions and horizontal trust in institutions regarding this hypothesis. The fourth hypothesis is that the relative weight of trust dimensions in predicting trust in major companies shifted over time towards the institutional trust. This may be because of changes in the political system, democratic backsliding, and the rise of populist attitudes. The fifth and the sixth hypotheses are derived directly from the second and third theoretical framework. Here we hypothesize that country level regulatory quality and macroeconomic performance conditions independently predict trust in major companies beyond the individual trust orientation. And the crowding in hypothesis will say that higher regulatory quality is positively associated with credible regulation and corporate trust. So to test this hypothesis, we used the IVS. This is the integrated value service. It's a combination of the WVS service and the EVS service, which contains data on 118 countries, spanning for 3 decades. It is ending with 442 country years clusters and more than 660,000 respondents. So in the first phase or step of this analysis, we've checked the first and the second hypothesis using exploratory factor analysis on and confirmatory factor analysis on 27 trust items. Here we ended with 7 factors. I will elaborate it in a minute. In the next steps, we've run an individual level models, including random intercept MLM for each trust dimension, predicting trust in major companies. Here we used the individual deviation from the country year cluster mean in each trust dimension to predict with it trust in major companies, and the contextual mean. This means that the mean of the trust dimension in the country to predict along with more demographic variables, trust in major companies. In the second step, we included more country-level variables that measure the regulatory indices. This includes indices from the Fraser Institute database, the economic freedom of the world. It includes more economic performance variables like GDP, inequality, unemployment, and GDP growth. This was meant to check the fifth and the sixth hypothesis. And the third step was to check the temporal dynamics, the fourth hypothesis. Here we included models that check the test trust dimensions interactions with time periods. This was a categorical variable to check for non-linear changes over time in regarding to the effects or to the correlations of the trust dimensions with predicting trust in major companies. So, as I said, in the first step, we conducted an exploratory factor analysis. Here, to isolate individual level covariation, we used within country wave centralization of each of these 27 items of trust. And we ended up with 7 factors that explained 47.6% of the variance using ML and Oblimin method. Then, after retaining these factors from the exploratory factor analysis, we used a confirmatory factor analysis to construct these latent variables. We constructed 5 factors, 5 trust dimensions. The first is the political institutional dimensions that was computed with the trust in government item, trust in parliament, trust in parties, and in civil service. The second dimension was law and order trust that was measured with the items of trust in the police, courts, armed forces. The third is the international trust, which was computed from the items regarding the trust in different international institutions such as the UN or other regional organizations. The fourth trust dimensions was in-group social trust dimension, which included items regarding trust in family members, neighbors, and people one might know. And the fifth dimension was the outgroup social dimension, which included items regarding people from other religions and from other nationality. Why 5 and not 7? Because we dropped two factors that emerge in the exploratory factor analysis, media trust and civil society trust, because they were theoretically peripheral to regular capitalism framework. What we don't see here is the item of generalized trust. This is an item that asks people whether they trust generally on, they have trust generally on other people. And because the exploratory factor analysis did not load it with other items. And the second is indeed trust in major companies. And this actually confirmed our second hypothesis that corporate trust actually does not cluster with other institutional or social trust items. It's empirically distinct, not just theoretically distinct. It's important to note that on some versions of this paper, it did loaded with other items, trust in banks, but not in this specific version. So let's dive into the findings. At first, we are looking at changes at trust dimensions over across time in the pooled data in all of the 660,000 respondents. And we see that trust in major companies had a very low change over time. The net change is actually only minus 0.7 standard deviation of the mean. In contrast, political trust had a steep decline over the years, and also the other dimensions like generalized trust, law and order trust, and trust in in-group trust, outgroup trust, and international trust. It's interesting. We expected to see some decrease in the trust in major companies after the economic crisis of the 2008, but we haven't actually seen it. What we did see is actually a major decline in political trust. When 61% of the countries have experienced such a decline in the political trust. But this was looking at the pool data, at all of the data together. And this perspective is masking actually and offsetting national trajectories and national and countries variation. We've noticed that if we take these countries and group them into three groups, those that had a large decline and those that have gone through have witnessed a large increase in trust in major companies, and those that have limited change. We can see some examples here on the right side. Some countries have experienced this major change, and some were having a large increase. But and actually 9.3% of the variance in trust in major companies is explained by the between countries and years differences. So this also gives strengthened our thought of controlling countries and country level variables, and check and test whether and how they have influence on trust on major companies, especially when we take them in account together with the trust dimensions on the individual level and on the country level. So let's dive into the results. At the first step, as I said, we ran separated models with each of the trust dimensions, the individual trust, the within individual trust dimension, and the contextual mean of each dimension. And we see that indeed the trust in institutions, political trust, law and order trust, and international trust had a larger effects or correlations with trust in major companies. These were also significant, but also social trust dimensions like the generalized trust, outgroup trust, and ingroup trust had a moderate, but more moderate correlations with trust in major companies. And when taking all of them in account in one model, we see that the effects of the social trust dimension is actually diminished, and of generalized trust it's even reversed. But still, political trust has the major effect on trust in major companies. This is also relevant to the contextual mean of political trust and international trust. This means that in places, in countries where the political trust mean was high, the trust in major companies also in the individual levels also was high. These two effects were the only significant of the contextual mean effects, but the other dimension effects, the other dimensions mean contextual mean effects were insignificant. So continuing with adding more country level variables, the regulatory variables and the economic performance variables, emerge an interesting picture, because we see that almost all of these variables are insignificant in predicting trust in major companies when controlling for the other trust dimensions and other demographic variables at the individual level. And the only exception here is the Gini coefficient, which had a positive coefficient, which means that in countries with a higher inequality, they had also a higher trust in major companies, which is actually counterintuitive. So from this slide, we understand that our fifth and sixth hypotheses are not supported. None of the EFW regulatory indices are significant. There is no crowding out or crowding in effect. More regulation is not negatively or positively associated with trust in major companies, and this challenges Agion and in his partners' insights. And we think that maybe there is an indirect pathway. Regulation might have an impact on institutional trust, and this on its turn has an impact or effect on trust in major companies. But regarding the time trends of the effects, we actually see in most of the trust dimension, we have seen stagnation or small shifts over these decades. The first point is the 1995, and we see and what we actually witnessed is that in the beginning or in the mid 90s until the beginning of the millennium, social trust, especially ingroup and outgroup trust, had positive and strong effects on trust in major companies that in the individual levels. And this actually diminished at the beginning of the millennium, and the effect of political trust actually increased over times. This means that trust in major corporations have become more politicized or more embedded with trust in political institutions. So, to conclude, the first and second hypothesis found to be accepted, and we actually rejected our fifth and sixth hypothesis. The fourth hypothesis is actually found to be accepted, and we have four takeaways of this paper. The first one is that trust in major companies is institutionally embedded. Citizens evaluate firms through political and legal legitimacy, and not through social optimism lens. Regulation works indirectly. It builds, maybe regulation matters, but indirectly it builds institutional trust, which in its turn supports trust in major companies, but there is no crowding out or crowding in effect. The third takeaway is that, and maybe it's the most important one, is that democratic backsliding actually threatens trust in major companies, because if political trust is the main driver, and then anything that roots political institutions and also will damage trust in major companies, and these have practical implications on companies and policymakers. Maybe they cannot restore trust in major companies through regulatory reform alone. They need to invest in broader democratic institutional legitimacy. So these are the four main takeaways of our paper. And the main conclusion is that trust in major companies is not residue of social cohesion or reflex of regulatory quality. It's a form of institutional market trust whose foundations have become over 3 decades increasingly political in character and increasingly bound up with contested legitimacy of regulatory capitalism in an era of democratic backsliding. Thank you for listening for this presentation. We also would love to hear your comments and insights on these findings and everything that you have that can contribute to improving it. It's important to note that it's work on progress, and we are still working on making it complete.
Yes.
And perfect.
Okay, thank you so much, Shahaf. Thank you all. Questions? Who wants to start? Comments, questions? Nobody. So, Marcus, please.
Thank you very much. That was very, very interesting. Couple of questions. Did you manage to differentiate in any way between the different sectors that the major corporations were working on, like banking, technology, oil, consumerism? Because I think that would be an interesting sideline to what you're doing. The other question is, you mentioned inside and outside. Does that in any way differentiate between the different stakeholders involved, the shareholders, the public, the regulators themselves, the stakeholders involved in having or not having trust in companies? Thanks.
Thank you for this question. I will take it and make it easier for Shahaf to answer. We are a bit constrained by the data we have here, right? And the data is on major companies collected over the years in so many countries. There are other sources of data, but nothing that we know exists nothing comparable, right? We have something on banks.
In this extent, and the numbers of countries and the respondents, and indeed there are no different or separated trust items for technology, but there is a trust item for trust in banks. So maybe this might be a good idea to treat it as a robustness test as the dependent variable.
Trust in bank is on limited number of years.
Yeah.
But we don't have information about those kind of answers from the respondents that would be ideal for advance. Usually, most of those questions and refinement would come from national surveys and to some extent European social survey, which has probably more questions. More questions, please? Anyone?
I can ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Well, more of a comment. So first of all, it's a really impressive, very impressive work, Shahaf and David, and I really like how you took several empirical steps to build your argument and tested. You did the factor analysis first. I liked how it builds gradually. I have two comments. One is just that there is a lot in this paper. There are a lot of different questions, and one might lose the focus a bit. So if I'm right and the main question is about what explains trust in major companies, then I would suggest comparing your hypotheses or introducing alternative explanations. So what do we currently know about what explains trust in companies, and to what extent your hypothesis about trust ecology and how does that compare to other explanations? That could strengthen your argument. And my second comment is about the finding where Gini, so inequality is associated with higher trust in companies, and I didn't find that counterintuitive actually. If my immediate thought was that, and this could be, you could test this and you could check this if I'm right, but if inequality is associated with lower trust in political institutes, so society loses trust in the institutions in the state that they expected to solve this problem, right? Then trust is shifted to other actors, to private actors. And then if you can test this through mediation analysis or to see if this makes sense, then that could be a way to explore your question about whether trust is complementary or transferable. So like kind of more exploring the trust ecology about it. So why is it a trust ecology? Because they work with each other, and when trust reduces in some actors, it shifts towards other actors. So maybe this could be a hint, and you can test if this really works.
Thank you so much, Libby. I will start. I know that Shahaf, you want to answer, but I will start and then Shahaf will complete. We do have alternative hypotheses. They probably should be put forward in the presentation and also in the draft paper. One alternative hypothesis is that the performances of the corporations would affect the trust in companies. And you can say this is the performance not directly of the major companies, but the economy in general. So GNP per capita, growth, etc. You can say this is the performance of the democratic system, meaning corruption. It's another performance indicator. The other, even another hypothesis is the regulatory quality of the country. So country with higher regulatory quality will have higher trust in government, in corporations. And actually we test all this, but we didn't put it forward as clearly as we should do. And this idea that regulatory quality goes hand in hand in positive relation, significant relation with trust in corporation goes against the suggestions that of Agion et al. Of crowding out, right? Yeah. So this is my answer, and Shahaf, you bring yours now.
Thank you, Libby. It's very important comments. Yeah, we have different directions of thought, especially for different competing hypotheses, especially for the regulatory variables, and the crowding in and crowding out might give us different directions for hypotheses. But empirically, what we see here is a null effect. Not to this direction or to this direction. So I wonder how can we stress it? Maybe to phrase it like a competing hypothesis clearly in the paper. Regarding the GD coefficient, it's interesting. We need to maybe we need to run a mediation model. What we see here is the net effect, right, of the Gini coefficient when we control other things, among them trust in the political system. So maybe this actually happens. Your direction actually happens in the data. Indeed, yeah, we need to check it.
Yes.
Thank you.
More questions? Ilya, please, comments?
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, David and Shahaf. This is a very rich and impressive study. There are many things to think about, but I think I will limit myself right now to a couple of questions. The first one, both of them are methodological, actually. The first one, I think, is especially challenging. I know that this is a difficult issue, but nevertheless, I'm wondering about the multi-level model and exploratory factor analysis in the following from the following perspective, that apparently, as far as I understood, the assumption was that the factor structure is the same basically for all countries, because I'm not totally sure, but it seems that exploratory factor analysis was implemented on the pooled data, not for countries separately. or in a multi-level model, and also multi-level model itself apparently was it included random intercept, but not varying slopes for different countries. So I'm wondering whether you think it reasonable or not reasonable to test the hypothesis that basically different countries can have different factor structures, and there are maybe some differences between countries in this respect, and not necessarily the same broad regularities for all countries together. So this is the first question, and the second question is about testing again et al.'s hypothesis about crowding out, crowding in, crowding in. I'm wondering whether the result that was obtained can be at least partially an artifact or consequence of some specific specification of the models, perhaps robustness checks. Playing with different sets of predictors or playing with different operationalizations of variables can yield different results, because from my work with the same data, it seems that the result itself, the crowding out hypothesis, is quite robust. So I'm wondering whether it can be checked, tested in different directions in order to substantiate it more fully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shahaf. Please.
Can I answer? Great. Thank you, Ilya. It's very important comments. First of all, I will say that we actually took in account your comments on the first version of this paper regarding the between and within country variation in the exploratory factor analysis phase by using the centered variables with the means inside the countries. So the exploratory factor analysis and the confirmatory factor analysis used these variables, the centered variables. So this was a way or a strategy to deal with it. Actually, I have been not quite sure whether should I use multi-level modeling using random effects or using country fixed effects. I can try to do them both. Regarding operationalization or different operationalization of the regulatory variables, indeed, I actually would love to consult with you with which variables should I use. If you have maybe if you checked different databases of regulatory equality, I would love to share it with you and to use them as a robustness test and check whether we will see there any evidences for the crowding out effect. I suspect that we don't see it because we control for trust, right? For trust in political system and international institutions, and this takes off the explanation of these regulatory variables. Thank you, Ili.
Thank you, Shahaf. Thank you.
Yes. Ruth, please. We don't hear you. You are muted. Yes. Now
My
should be
mouse
fine.
didn't work. That's fine. I clicked it, but it now seems to have worked. And great, really interesting, fascinating use of that database. It follows on slightly from the last question, I guess, but not about countries, but about time periods. I'm wondering, did anything really, given that some of your countries went up and some went down over the long period, if you looked at dates, say, before the financial crash and after, do you get the same thing? I realize that gives dangers of multiple comparisons and so on, but I would be interested to know whether the financial crisis made a big difference to the ecology of trust. Thanks.
Shahaf?
Yeah, well, the descriptive analysis showed that the crisis in 2008 did not have any effect on, on the trend, right? What you suggest is to see whether the effects of the different trust dimensions on trust in major companies indeed change after the 2008, maybe to look at these two periods separately. It might be a good direction to check, but currently what we did is to group each of these periods into different groups according to the WVS wave. And we used as a reference group the 1995 until 1999, and each of the coefficients that we see in the time trends is compared actually to this time period. So if we see major changes, it's compared to this time period. But my hunch is that there hasn't been a very large shift in the effects. We see it in the paper. We have figure number 5 that show these trends over time, and it's actually we see kind of stagnation in some of the dimensions. As I said, we see erosion in social trust. But we should look at these two time periods alone.
Yeah. What we find it's difficult to, we need to deal with the complexity of the data. So we have stability overall, the world stability, but for sure, for some of the countries, that the picture is different. And we need to understand it, and nobody did it. We have more data nowadays, at least in some spheres, than the ability to analyze it. And those trust indicators from the World Value Survey, the European Social Survey, or Value Survey, are some of them. So the data is there, but to capture these complexities and to see those different dynamics in different countries, it's difficult. It's descriptive. The issue is descriptive. So, and we don't tend to, we are not encouraged to do descriptive work, which is important on its own. And this is some of the difficulties that we have. But the points that you made and the question is very interesting, and we should find a way to look inside while having the big picture. Yeah. Thank you, Ruth. And Sharon, please.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Shahaf. Fantastic. I'm just going to build upon what Ruth said. Shahaf, I don't really know how the data is built in the IVS, but what you could do, if you're like focusing around the subprime crisis of 2008, you could do an event study, meaning you could maybe run a diff and diff analysis. You know, taking Finland, for instance, or a few other countries surrounding where you can see the big differences and big variations in trust in big companies, and see if that could maybe explain, because as you say, right now you're eyeballing it, but you want to cement it in something really, you know, you can sink your teeth into it in terms of explanatory power. So I think if you could find data within a few countries that you can then identify big variation in, and then run a sort of study like that before and after, it would be very interesting to see.
Thank you, Shahaf.
Indeed. Thank you, Sharon. It's a very important comment. I should try definitive. Yeah. I actually lost connection regarding the data that you said that I might collect. So can you repeat maybe data that need to be collected?
It's not that you need to collect data. You have to see when those countries that you see the variation in were actually surveyed. And if you can see the
Okay.
same country and different survey times within
Yeah.
that time period, then you
Yeah.
can do a different diff.
The definitive will show, yeah. Okay, thank you. Actually, okay.
Okay,
We will discuss your comment. You sent us your comments separately, and I would love to discuss them with you, especially regarding the multicollinearity between social trust and the other
Good.
dimensions. So
Yeah.
we will talk about it later.
Thank you so much. More questions? If not, we will conclude by with you, Shahaf. This is a work in progress. What's the way forward?
I think that what we need to do is actually check the things that have been elaborated here. Maybe to check some robustness tests, but I'm not sure whether this paper will lead to different results or conclusions. So if you have something on mind, maybe to elaborate it to more projects, but as a standalone paper, I think that actually most of the things have been done here.
Okay, I don't hear you well. Let me also ask anyone, any questions, comment? If not, thank you so much. I guess the next presentation in this series will be with Ilya sometimes in the coming weeks. Thank you all for your participation, and see you soon. Thank you, Shahaf, and thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.